Yeah. So we distinguish between two types of child grooming: internet grooming and localized grooming. Internet grooming is when a child is approached online via the internet by someone with sexual intentions. And localized grooming is when the same happens, but usually offline, in a club, in a library, in a grocery store, on the way to school, in school. So localized grooming is grooming in physical settings by an adult, and it's an exponentially growing scourge. Yeah, there are recent studies starting in 2011. About half, a shocking number, half of all minors between the ages of 12 and 17 are accosted online by sexual predators. Now, 1 of every 10 adolescents, they sexted with these adults. They exchange sexually explicit material with these strangers. And it is a myth that these adults pretend to be teenagers. That's absolutely untrue. The vast majority of these sexual predators present themselves as adults and express immediately the wish to have sex or to exchange sexual material. In other words, they rarely hide their identity or their intentions. Now, in 1/3 of these cases, about 3% of all teenagers, there is an offline meeting. The parties discuss an offline meeting. And in 1 of 300 adolescents proceed to meet the sexual predator. So 1 in 300 adolescents ends up meeting the sexual predator. And these teenagers had reported that they went to the meeting with the express and premeditated intention of having sex with their interlocutors. So it's again not true that the teenagers or adolescents go to these meetings not knowing what's going to happen. They go to these meetings to have sex. And then in many, many cases, too many to countenance, these teenagers are subjected to group sex, and many of them are prostituted. Although it is not presented as prostitution, it's presented as a favor. Can you do me a favor and sleep with this guy? This guy is my friend, would you mind sleeping with him? Or, you're so nice to me, I love you, can you help me with this guy? He needs a friend for the night, or this kind of thing. So, but it's prostitution, because the teenager is recycled among multiple sex partners, adult sex partners. And usually the gang that recycles these teenagers collects money for the services. And so this is 100% prostitution. Now, these teenagers are given alcohol, they're given drugs, unlimited amounts, usually before the sex, to facilitate the sex, to disinhibit them, because at some point these teenagers begin to understand that something's wrong. But I have read literature, I've read case studies in literature, and I had interviewed quite a few of these teenagers, maybe in my career 50 or 60 of these teenagers. Sometimes immediately after the events, and sometimes decades later when they came to me as clients. And here's the thing, they deny and refrain in order to survive with the shame and with the guilt and with the self-directed anger and aggression. These people have to lie to themselves. So they deny everything. They repress everything. And above all, they reframe everything. They said, it wasn't abusive. I wanted it. I wanted the sex. I loved the sex. I was the one who initiated the sex. I was the one who asked for sex. Yeah, and I wanted multiple partners because I was discovering my sexuality, and it was great fun. And it was a phase. Many of them would say it was just a phase. It took 2 years and I was out of it. And now I'm a normal, healthy person, and it had no effect on me. It definitely was not traumatic because I didn't experience it as a trauma, etc., etc. There's a lot of denial. And a lot of even if they were unconscious, owing to excess drink, in a blackout or something, they would deny that. They would say, no, I was conscious. I knew what I was doing. I wanted the sex, etc. It's very difficult to establish the facts because there is an enormous resistance and defense against the facts. And these underage outliers, because it's one of 300, these underage outliers, they have only two things in common. Number one, they have a fervent wish to belong to and to be loved by a substitute family, a gang, a group, a boyfriend with his friends, so-called boyfriend. So they want to belong. They want to be loved. They want someone to care about them. And this is because the real family is dysfunctional and neglectful, doesn't care about them. So this is common denominator number one. And common denominator number two, all these adolescents were diagnosed with dark triad personality: narcissism, psychopathy, Machiavellianism, manipulativeness. And this dark triad personality becomes more pronounced and more diagnosable as these adolescents, as these teenagers grow up. And so the dysregulated and overwhelming sexual curiosity and sexual hyperactivity in puberty aligns with these nascent disorders, because psychopaths are hypersexual. Psychopathy goes hand in hand with hypersexuality. So is borderline. Borderline goes hand in hand with disinhibited sexuality and reckless sexuality. So these adolescents, the 1 in 300, they have all the foundations and the rudiments and the elements of psychopathy, of borderline personality disorder, some grandiosity, potentially narcissism. And their sexuality expresses these disorders, is aligned with them. And so the question is, which is the chicken and which is the egg? The unspoken taboo conundrum in psychology is this: psychopathy and borderline traits involve partly hereditary brain abnormalities. They're partly genetic, and they definitely involve brain dysfunctions, brain abnormalities. And these disorders can be diagnosed even in childhood. For example, conduct disorder, which is psychopathy in children. So, which preceded which? Can these disorders, can these flaws have propelled these specific children to seek or even to initiate precocious sex with like-minded predatory adults? In other words, maybe these people are not lying. Maybe they were really the ones who had initiated the sex. Maybe they were really the ones who had wanted the sex, because they were budding psychopaths. And psychopaths are hyperactive. Coupled with the natural curiosity of an adolescent about sexuality, this could be overwhelming and could push them to act out and to solicit sex from sexual predators. So we don't know what preceded what. These people have been almost universally diagnosed with psychopathy and borderline later on in life, and this must have started in adolescence. So by the time they found themselves with the sexual predator being prostituted or being co-opted into group sex or whatever, by that time they will already have been almost full-fledged psychopaths and borderlines. And so it's difficult to tell who started it all. At some stage, of course, these children learn that the love that they are offered by the predator is exploitive. It's fake. There's no love there, and they don't belong anywhere. It was all a fake facade intended to motivate them to sleep with strangers. But at the same time, these children, these adolescents, these teenagers, these underage people, they come to realize that they can use sex to manipulate people, to manipulate adults. They can wield power over adults. They can control adults with their sexuality. This experience of working together with sexual predators to give sexual services to strangers, many strangers, few strangers, doesn't matter, teaches them the power of sex. Suddenly they feel validated, they feel empowered. And from that minute on, and for the rest of their lives, they become promiscuous, because promiscuity guarantees control, guarantees winning the power play, which is the main feature of psychopathy, and of course the main feature of borderline in a desperate attempt to prevent abandonment. And so internet and localized offline grooming leading to actual sex had been associated with depression and anxiety in later life. We have studies that show this. If you're exploited, sexually exploited as a teenager, you're much more likely to have anxiety and depression later on in life. But depression and anxiety, including social anxiety, they are frequently dually diagnosed, connected to psychopathy and borderline personality disorder, even in psychopaths and borderlines who didn't have such experiences. In other words, if you're a psychopath, if you have borderline personality disorder, you're very likely to have anxiety and depression, whether you've been exploited by a sexual predator or not. So it is impossible to prove causation. We can't prove that the sexual predation, the sexual abuse, the sexual exploitation led to the anxiety and the depression, because anxiety and depression are there, whether you had this experience or not. It's a convoluted psychological landscape, and it's difficult to disentangle what led to what, if at all. Precocious sex may simply be an early example of acting out, borderline or psychopathic acting out. Later, when these people become adults, they become promiscuous, even compulsively promiscuous, because this is the only technique, this is the only coping strategy they had developed to feel safe, to feel that they're in control, to feel empowered, and to fend off possible threats and so on. Yeah, finished. Could you repeat this? I'm sorry, my hearing is impaired. Could you repeat this again? Feminism. Okay, yeah. Maybe even earlier. Maybe even earlier. It's a difficult question. No, I'm not saying that. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm sorry. That's not what I'm saying. I don't know where you got this from. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the chance to clarify. I'm not against feminism, and I'm definitely not a sexist. When feminism started as a suffragette movement in the 19th century, it was fully justified. Women were treated as slaves or chattel, as property. They were listed in property lists. Their property belonged to the husband. They didn't have a right to vote. They couldn't work in a variety of professions. They couldn't obtain education. There was numerus clausus forbade them from obtaining education. All this was wrong. It's catastrophically wrong. So the beginnings of feminism in the form of suffragette movements all over the world, this was justified. These were justified demands for equality and access. Absolutely, yes. Even I would say the suffragettes were much more violent than Me Too. I mean, much more aggressive than the current brand of feminism. But feminism took a wrong, militant turn in the 1960s. As it transitioned from justified demands for equality and access to misandry, man-hating, the undermining of all social institutions, whether these social institutions were part of the patriarchy, male chauvinistic control, or whether these institutions were actually good for women, and not part of the patriarchy. Militant feminists were undermining all social institutions because they were established by men. That was sufficient qualification to be dismantled. And there was a usurpation taking over of gender roles. Women aspired to be like men. And not only did they aspire to eliminate the differences, the beautiful differences, the differences that create attraction between men and women. Not only did they aspire to eliminate these differences in everything, in clothing, in behavior, in foul language, in drinking, in drug abuse, in adultery, in promiscuity, women were trying to become men. And not only were they trying to become men, but they were trying to become psychopathic men. And they're doing a good job of it. They're not very far from that. The level of narcissism, for example, psychopathic narcissism among women is now equal to men, which was not the case only 30 years ago. So now we have unigender. We have a single gender because men are exactly like women, women are exactly like men. They have different genitalia. So it's a single gender with two types of genitalia. And this leads to what is called gender vertigo. We don't know how to behave anymore because there are no clear roles for men and clear roles for women. It's fuzzy, it's fluid, and it's fluid in the bad sense because women are imitating the worst aspects of masculinity. Women are actually adopting toxic masculinity, while men are adopting toxic femininity. It's dizzyingly crazy. Yeah, exactly. Me too, for example. So there's this intersectional victimhood movements and agendas which were hijacked by narcissists and psychopaths. And these victimhood movements started with laudable aims, with appropriate demands and so on, but they were hijacked simply by narcissists and psychopaths. Grandiose people. And so these movements coalesced with a militant feminism that started in the 1960s. And now we have very disturbing orientations exacerbated by these politically correct victimhood, Me Too, grievance movements. Every disagreement, every argument, every conflict, every shade of opinion, every form of critical thinking is now considered abusive. It flattens speech. We are creating flat speech. Women and men gradually began to resent each other, vilify each other, label each other. I would even say that today there's hatred between men and women, collectively, collective hatred. They hate each other. And this, you see, yeah, exactly. You can see examples of this, and it's culminated in misogynistic movements, such as incels, red pillars, MGTOWs, and so on, in the manosphere. It's really bad out there. And it didn't help that there were also economic trends which made matters worse. For example, divorce. The skyrocketing rates of divorce, now around 50%. Now and for the last few decades, around 50%. So divorce, for example, this was the greatest transfer of wealth and property in human history, dwarfing the oil shock of the 70s, dwarfing anything that had ever happened in human history. This transfer of gigantic, ginormous amounts of money and property from men to women in divorce settlements. This didn't help. It left men very bitter. And it did not empower women, by the way. Single women after divorce are poorer than when they are married. The academic attainments of women now and for the last 15 years exceed men's. About 2/3 of all college graduates are women. Men are not getting education, high education. And so their earning potential is much lower than women in the long run, in the next few decades. So women are much more educated. It's more difficult for them to find an appropriate partner, someone to talk to after the sex, you know. And this has led to the replacement of men by women. Women have displaced many men in middle-class professions. So now men are rebelling, they're protesting, they're pushing back, because men are boys be boys, they are aggressive, they are testosterone laden, they're enraged, they are not, they don't pay attention to the nuances and the subtle and fine print and fine points. So men refuse to marry. Marriage rates collapse. Men refuse to have children. Why? Because they can have sex at the drop of a hat. Sex has been commodified. It's now emotionless. Yes? Ask any young person. They will tell you, sex? It's nothing. It's a physical function. It's fun. It's just for fun. No, we're not emotionally involved. There's no intimacy here. It's 5 pumps and 5 dumps. That's all. That's what sex is. So, sex is around the corner. And since sex is around the corner, why get married? Why buy the whole cow if all you want is a glass of milk? And so, this unbridled access to sex, coupled with the unfavorable matrimonial legislation, which favors women, this created a disincentive for men to marry and have children. They have no incentive to commit or to invest in relationships or even to have relationships. Indeed, for the first time in human history, majorities of people, especially women, are single. Women and men pine for each other. They miss each other. There's nothing more beautiful than a couple. By the way, not only men and women, any couple, homosexual couple. There's nothing more beautiful than togetherness. Nothing more soothing and comforting and supporting and life extending than intimacy. And men miss women and women miss men. Everyone is cocooned in bachelor pads or stuck in dives and single joints, and no one is getting anywhere. And the genders miss each other. But I think it's too late. Yeah, no. I don't see any cause for optimism. I'm sorry, I have to disagree with you. So I have to disagree with you. We also have a bit of an age difference, so I have a perspective over you. I don't see any reason for optimism. I think it's too late. The schism, the divide, the abyss between the genders will not heal. It's only getting worse. It's getting worse. If you look at statistics, numerous studies, people under age 25, they date 56% less. Dating apps fill in the gap, but not efficiently. A tiny fraction of a sliver end up actually dating. And majority of the youth, people under age 35, they lead celibate lifestyles. That's a majority. I think you may enjoy watching or benefit from watching my video about youth sexlessness, where I had summarized the 20 largest studies of youth sexuality. But you know what? The video is 1 hour long. Let me summarize it for you. A video about youth sexuality, there isn't. End of story. Thank you for listening. No youth sexuality, that's all. Well, you know, young people become adults. So if you get used in your adolescence or as a young person to not have sex, to not have relationships, because you don't know how to have relationships, if you are used just to pump and dump, and I mean, that's how your life is going to look like. Sterile, lonely, wasted, dead. Young people are dead inside. Dead inside. Well, of course I do. Of course I'm not generalizing. You can always come with an anecdote of your cousin who is not dead inside. I'm talking about youth. The picture is not good. The incidence of anxiety went up 5 times. The incidence of depression went up 3 times. Suicide rates have climbed 50% in the last decade alone, especially among young women. It's not a good picture. None. Teenagers are voting with their guns and nooses. They're committing suicides and pills and knives. They're killing themselves. They don't want to live in this world. Honestly, I can't blame them. God knows what will happen after the pandemic. Oh. Okay, we can always disagree, no? I think it's good to move on to the next question. I said what I have to say. I mean, what else can I say? Okay, I disagree. I don't know. I'm data driven, not anecdote driven and not hope driven. I don't believe in hope. I believe there's nothing worse ever to have been invented than hope. Hope is a drug. Hopefulness is a drug addiction. Okay, you wish to hope. I hope you succeed to hope in the face of all the overwhelming tsunami of data. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on, please. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's a new study. It's published last July. It just supports something that Theodore Millen, many others, had been saying for decades. Heinz Kohut is the father of narcissistic personality disorder. These people have been saying it for decades. Hans Kohut said it in 1974. And they humble me. I also said it 20 what? In 1995, 26 years ago. I'm cited in the article as well. My work is cited in the article. So they simply say that what we used to consider as narcissists are actually psychopaths, and that real narcissists are compensatory. And all the big names in psychology actually said the same. It's very surprising. Yeah, compensatory. It's like, they feel inadequate, they feel inferior, and they're covering up for it with a show, with an act. No, not every narcissist is a psychopath. Grandiose narcissist is a subsection. It's a few narcissists. They're grandiose. And they're psychopaths, probably. Yeah, all psychopaths have grandiosity. All borderlines, by the way, have grandiosity as well. Grandiosity is a trait. Or maybe a cognitive deficit, depending how you conceive it. Yeah, it's common in many disorders. Even in psychosis, by the way. There's psychotic grandiosity. Psychopaths don't experience mortification like narcissists. No. The narcissist mortification is when the firewall, the fortification, the defense that he had constructed, the false self, crumbles. And the narcissist remains like a turtle without a shell, skinless, defenseless, facing himself in the mirror without the distorting effects of the false self. The false self keeps lying to the narcissist all the time. The false self tells the narcissist, you are handsome, you are irresistible, you are a genius, so there's a feedback from the false self supported by well-meaning people, narcissistic supply. So when this is taken away, the narcissist faces himself in the mirror and says, I'm not a genius, I'm an idiot. And I'm not handsome, I look like Quasimodo on a bad day. So, and that is mortification. Psychopaths don't have this. Psychopaths actually are affectless. They don't have affect. They don't have emotions, of course. They don't have empathy. But they don't have anything else. They're like very, very primitive, basic organisms. They have dim stirrings of disappointment, resentment, frustration, aggression when they're rejected. Generally, psychopaths experience only one of two binary mental states. They either feel euphoric and king of the world, a bit manic, or much more often, they feel bad. Not bad depressed, not bad ashamed, not bad guilty, just bad, like they've eaten something bad, like you feel bad after you ate something spoiled. They just feel bad, biak kind of feeling. So the psychopath is in one of two states. I'm on top of the world, biak, I'm on top of the world, this kind of thing. And it's very, very fundamental, very basic. You can't break it down to anything. Narcissist's internal world is much richer than the psychopath. And so psychopaths respond with reactance. They are defiant. They're angry when they are humiliated in public, but they are not mortified. They're not mortified because psychopaths are goal-oriented. They want to get from A to B, never mind who stands in the way and who said what to whom. They are just on their way to B, point B. So when they're humiliated or attacked or insulted, they shrug it off. They shrug it off and they move on. The mafia dons, the mobsters who revenge and avenge, they do it because honor, reputation is the glue that holds everything together in crime. It's not because they take it personally. As they keep saying in the movies, I'm killing you, but it's nothing personal, it's business. You know, or you're my friend, I will kill you for free. No, not you. You're not my friend. So I will not kill you. I will not kill you, I'll keep you alive. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We have a few. We have a few more minutes. I have a client in. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
A végére hagytam a pedofília és a hebefilia, ami a tinédzser korúakkal való szexet jelenti, témakörét, amely szintén nagyon erős a narcisztikusban. Hál' Istennek a legtöbbjüknek csak fantáziában vagy látens pedofíliában nyilvánul meg. Gyakori például, hogy a narcisztikus emiatt gerjed szexuálisan is sokszor a nagyon vékony, gyermektestű, törékeny nőkre, mert ezek az ideáljai. De bizony vannak olyanok is, akik ezen jóval túlmennek. Gyakori, hogy a narcisztikus apák meztelenre vetköztetik gyermekeiket, meglepik őket fürdés vagy vécézés közben, ölükbe, nyakukba ültetik a gyereket, hogy érezhessék a vágyat, elkérik, elveszik a használt fehérneműiket, vagy meglesik a kulcsukon át a fürdőző gyermekeiket. Nem szeretnék pánikot, ezért kérdezem tőled, Szem, hogy hol van a határ? Mikortól kell félni attól, hogy a narcisztikus veszélyes lehet a saját vagy mások gyermekeire? Milyen gyakori a pedofília a narcisztikusnál vagy a pszichopatánál? Lehet erre jó megoldás egy sovány partner? Az egyik narcisztikus ügyfelem azt mondta, hogy a fantáziájában egy 3 éves gyermekkel létesítene szexuális viszonyt, főleg orálisan, de tudja az eszével, hogy ezt nem szabad. Mégis retteg attól, hogy egyszer ilyen helyzetbe kerül, és egyedül marad egy kisgyermekkel, és hogy akkor bántani fogja. Mit gondolsz erről?
Like with everything else, there are numerous myths about pedophiles. First of all, it is not true that pedophiles are attracted only to children. A majority of pedophiles are heterosexual, and majority of them have families and children of their own. And they are attracted to opposite sex, actually and actively attracted to opposite sex. That's a majority. 20% of the population have constant pedophile fantasies. It's not rare. Majority of fathers are sexually attracted to their teenage daughters. It's also a fact. I said before, anything can be a sexual object. Your daughter could be a sexual object. Why not? She's young, she's beautiful, she's nubile, she's sexy. There's no problem, in principle, for a father to be sexually attracted to his daughter. I would have found it actually very disturbing if a man, with all the equipment, would not be attracted to a young female, just because, technically, he is her father. That would, for me, indicate some serious sexual disturbance. The question, therefore, is not in the urges and the drives. As Freud said, in the id, as he called it, we have numerous drives and numerous urges which are not acceptable in society, damaging to others, harmful. And it is our role, via the ego and so on, to control these drives, to moderate them, to modify them, to sublimate them, to... This is one of them. The drive to have sex with children is ancient. And until extremely recently, codified in the law. In Britain, until 160 years ago, in Britain, the legal age for marriage for a woman was 10 years old. 10. In Yemen, until a few years ago, was 12. In Afghanistan was 12. And so on. This is culture dependent. In the vast majority of the world, until very recently, a woman at the age of 12 was able to conceive, and the minute she had a period, she was able to conceive and was considered, eligible for marriage. The concept of childhood is a very new concept. If you read Charles Dickens, there's no mention of the word child. They used to be called young adults, young men, young women. Louisa May Alcott wrote a book. She didn't call it young children. She called it young women. The book is about children. If you read Louisa May Alcott's book, which is now a movie, it's about children. But she has no concept of children. She calls them young women. Because starting at the age of 4 or 6, depending on the people, went to work in factories to help the father, or in the fields. Or if they were already 12 years old, they had children. Now, the very concept of child is very new. As the concept of child was invented, again in Victorian Britain and in France this time, the concept of child was invented, we started to have prohibitions on certain interactions with children. Now, pedophilia is and should remain a crime, active pedophilia. And so we should distinguish between the act and the fantasies. Fantasies are common. They are not unique to narcissists. They are detailed. There is a sprawling industry of child pornography online because of that. And the fantasies should not be suppressed, cannot be fought, cannot be, on the very contrary, I think it will be counterproductive. What should be monitored very closely are the acts. And this is where your other question comes in. Where's the line? Where's the line? First of all, because of the unique structure of narcissists and psychopaths' personality, the risk of incest is much higher with narcissists and psychopaths. And the risk of pedophilia, active pedophilia, is much higher with narcissists and psychopaths. Because they regard the children as an extension of themselves, so they're actually having sex with themselves, because they think they are actually educating the child or doing the child a favor, introducing the child to sex, because they believe that the child needs some kind of special protection. It's endless. Very big risk with narcissists and psychopaths. So with narcissists and psychopaths, the minute inappropriate behavior begins to show up, the kind you described, with the bathroom and so on, this must be cause for serious alert, because it's a slippery slope, and the narcissist starts by entering the shower when the child is naked, and before you know it, he's having sex with the child. In the case of narcissists and psychopaths, there's no impulse control, no boundaries, no limits, no obedience to rules, So there you cut it the minute there is the first hint of inappropriate behavior. Not with normal people. With normal, healthy people, a conversation would do. Listen, you embarrass a child, it's not okay. Child may misunderstand what you're doing. It's okay. You can talk to healthy, normal people. No need for alarm. But with narcissists and psychopaths, you aggressively defend the child. You have to aggressively protect the child and educate the child. If father is doing this, it's not okay. You should tell father, please, father, can you leave you should teach the child to be proactive, for the child to set her or his own boundaries and enforce them, and warn the child to identify warning signs.
My name is Sam Daphne. I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited. Pedophiles are attracted to prepubescent children, and they act on their sexual fantasies. It is a startling fact that the etiology of this paraphilia is unknown. We don't know the reasons. Pedophiles come from all walks of life. They have no common socioeconomic background. Contrary to media-propagated myths, most of pedophiles had not been sexually abused in childhood. And the vast majority of pedophiles are also drawn to adults of the opposite sex. They are actually heterosexuals. Only a few pedophiles belong to the exclusive type, the ones who are tempted solely by kids. 9/10 of all pedophiles are male. They are fascinated by preteen females, teenage males, or more rarely, both. Moreover, at least 1/5 and probably more of the population have pedophiliac tendencies. The prevalence of child pornography and child prostitution prove it. Pedophiles start out as normal people, and they are profoundly shocked and distressed to discover their illicit sexual preference for the pre-pubertal. The process and mechanisms of transition from socially acceptable sexuality to much condemned and criminal pedophilia are still largely mysterious. Pedophiles seem to have narcissistic and antisocial psychopathic traits. They lack empathy for their victims, and they express no remorse for their actions. They are in denial, and being pathological confabulators, they rationalize their transgressions, claiming that the children were merely being educated for their own good, and anyhow derived great pleasure from the sexual act. The pedophile's egosyntony, his ability to live with himself, rests on his alloplastic defenses. The pedophile generally tends to blame others, or the world, or the system, for his misfortunes, failures, and deficiencies. Pedophiles frequently accuse their victims of acting promiscuously, of coming onto them, of actively tempting, provoking, and seducing or luring them, or even trapping them. The pedophile, similar to the autistic patient, misinterprets the child's body language and interpersonal cues. The pedophile's social communication skills are impaired, and he fails to adjust information gained to the surrounding circumstances, for instance, to the kid's age and maturity. Coupled with the pedophile's lack of empathy, this recurrent inability to truly comprehend others caused the pedophile to objectify the targets of his lasciviousness. Pedophilia is in essence autoerotic. The pedophile uses children's bodies to masturbate with. Hence the success of the internet among pedophiles. It offers disembodied, anonymous, masturbatory sex. Children in cyberspace are mere representations, symbols, often nothing more than erotic photos and screen names. It is crucial to realize that pedophiles are not enticed by the children themselves, by their bodies, or by their budding and nubile sexuality. Remember Nabokov's Lolita? It's wrong. Pedophiles are actually drawn to what children symbolize, to what pre-adolescents stand for and represent. With the advent of feminism and gender equality, women have lost their traditional role as socially acceptable and permissible sexual child substitutes, except perhaps in Japan. This social upheaval may account for the rise in pedophilia across the world. The pedophile views his relationships with children in a very peculiar light. First of all, sex with children to the pedophile is free in dairy. Sex with sub-teens implies freedom of action with impunity. It enhances the pedophile's magical sense of omnipotence and immunity. By defying the authority of a state and the edicts of his culture and society, the pedophile experiences an adrenaline rush to which he gradually becomes addicted. Illicit sex becomes the outlet for his urgent need to live dangerously and recklessly. The pedophile is on a quest to reassert control over his life. Studies have consistently demonstrated that pedophilia is associated with anomic states, war, famine, epidemics, and with major life crises, failure, relocation, infidelity of a spouse, separation, divorce, unemployment, bankruptcy, illness,
death of the offender's nearest and dearest, and so on and so forth. When everything else crumbles, pedophilia is an outlet. It is likely, though unsubstantiated by research, that the typical pedophile is depressive and with a borderline personality, low organization, and fuzzy personal boundaries. Pedophiles are reckless and emotionally labil. The pedophile's sense of self-worth is volatile and dysregulated. He is likely to suffer from abandonment anxiety and to be codependent or counterdependent at heart. Paradoxically, it is by seemingly losing control in one aspect of his life, sex, that the pedophile reacquires a sense of mastery. The same mechanism is at work in the development of eating disorders. An inhibitory deficit is somehow magically perceived as self-control and omnipotence. There's another type of thinking, pedophile thinking. Sex with children is corrupt and decadent and therefore hot. The pedophile makes frequent, though unconscious, use of projection and projective identification in his relationships with children. He makes his victims treat him the way he views himself, or attributes to them traits and behaviors that are truly his. The pedophile is aware of society's view of his actions as vile, corrupt, forbidden, evil, and decadent, especially if the pedophiliac act involves incest. The pedophile derives pleasure from the sleazy nature of his pursuits because he tends to sustain his view of himself as bad, a failure, deserving of punishment, worthless, and guilty. In extreme, mercifully uncommon cases, the pedophile projects these torturous feelings and self-perceptions onto his victims. The children, defiled and abused by the pedophile's sexual attentions, become rotten, bad objects, guilty and punishable. And this leads to sexual sadism, lust rape, and, in extreme cases, snuff murders. Sex with children is a reenactment of a painful past. Many pedophiles truly bond with their prey. To them, children are the reification of innocence, genuineness, trust, gullibility, and faithfulness. The pedophile associates these qualities with a nostalgic past. He wishes to recapture this past via his relationships with children. The relationship with the child provides the pedophile with a safe passage to his own repressed and fearful inner child. Through his victim, the pedophile gains access to his suppressed and thwarted emotions, in a way to his true self. It is a fantasy-like second chance to reenact the pedophile's childhood, and this time benignly and under the pedophile's control. The pedophile's dream to make peace with his past comes true, transforming the interaction with the child to an exercise in wish fulfillment. But sex with the child is also a shared psychosis. The pedophile treats his chosen child as an object, an extension of himself, devoid of separate existence and denuded of distinct needs. He finds the child's submissiveness and gullibility gratifying, as we said. He frowns on any sign of personal autonomy and regards it as a threat. By intimidating, cajoling, charming, and making false promises, the abuser isolates his prey from his family, school, peers, and from the rest of society. This way, he makes the child's dependence on him total. To the pedophile, the child is a kind of transitional object, a training ground on which to exercise his adult relationship skills. The pedophile erroneously feels that the child will never betray and abandon him, therefore guaranteeing object constancy. The pedophile, stealthily but unfailingly, exploits the vulnerabilities in the psychological makeup of his victim. The child may have low self-esteem, a fluctuating sense of self-worth, primitive defense mechanisms, phobias, mental health problems, a disability, a history of failure,
bad relations with parents, siblings, teachers, or peers, or a tendency to blame herself or to feel inadequate, autoplastic neurosis, as it is known. The kid may come from an abusive family or environment, which condition her or him to expect abuse as inevitable and normal. In extreme and rare cases, the victim is a masochist, possessed of an urge to seek ill treatment and pain. Therefore, the pedophile is a perfect match. The pedophile is the guru at the center of a cult. Like other gurus, he demands complete obedience from his partner. He feels entitled to adulation and special treatment by his child mate. He punishes the wayward and the straying lambs. He enforces discipline in his household. The child finds himself in a twilight zone. The pedophile imposes on the child a shared psychosis, replete with persecutory delusions, enemies, mythical narratives, and apocalyptic scenarios if he is flouted. The child is rendered the joint guardian of a horrible secret. The pedophile's control is based on ambiguity, unpredictability, fuzziness, and ambient abuse. His ever-shifting whims exclusively define right versus wrong, desirable versus unwanted, what is to be pursued and what is to be avoided. The pedophile alone determines rights and obligations, and he alters them at will. The typical pedophile is a micromanager, even obsessive-compulsive. He exerts control over the minutest details and behaviors. He punishes severely and abuses withholders of information and those who fail to conform to his wishes and goals. The pedophile does not respect the boundaries and privacy of the often reluctant and terrified child. He ignores his or her wishes and treats children as objects or instruments of gratification. He seeks to control both situation and people compulsively. The pedophile acts in a patronizing and condescending manner and criticizes often. He alternates between emphasizing the minutest faults, evaluation, and exaggerating the looks, talents, traits, and skills of the child, idealization. The pedophile is wildly unrealistic in his expectations, which legitimizes his subsequent abusive conduct in the guise of punishment. Narcissistic pedophiles claim to be infallible, superior, talented, skillful, omnipotent, and omniscient. They often lie and confabulate to support the unfounded claims and to justify their actions. Most pedophiles suffer from cognitive deficits and reinterpret reality to fit their fantasies. In extreme cases, the pedophile feels above the law, any kind of law. This grandiose and haughty conviction leads to criminal acts, incestuous or polygamous relationships, and recurrent friction with the authorities. These are the antisocial or psychopathic pedophiles. Pedophiles therefore regard relationship with children as an ego booster. Some-teen children are by definition inferior to the pedophile. They are physically weaker, dependent on others for the fulfillment of many of their needs, cognitively and emotionally immature and easily manipulated. Their fund of knowledge is limited, and their skills are restricted. The pedophile's relationships with children buttress the pedophile's twin grandiose delusions of omnipotence and omniscience. Compared to his victims, the pedophile is always the strongest, the wisest, the most skillful, and the most well-informed. And sex with children, of course, guarantees companionship. Inevitably, the pedophile considers his child victims to be his best friends and companions. Pedophiles are lonely, erotomaniac people. The pedophile believes that he is in love with or simply loves the child. Sex is merely a way to communicate his affection and caring. But of course there are other venues. To show his keen interest, the common pedophile keeps calling the child, dropping by, writing emails, giving gifts, providing services, doing unsolicited errands on the kid's behalf, getting into relationships with the preteen's parents, friends, teachers, and peers, and in general making himself available at all times. Less charitably, this may be construed as stalking. The pedophile feels free to make legal, financial, and emotional decisions for the child. The pedophile therefore intrudes on the victim's privacy, disrespects the child's expressed wishes and personal boundaries, and ignores his or her emotions, needs, and preferences. To the pedophile, love means enmeshment and clinging, coupled with an overpowering separation anxiety, fear of being abandoned. No amount of denials, chastising, threats, and even outright hostile actions convince the erotomaniac pedophile that the child is not in love with him. The pedophile knows better, and he will make the world see the light as well. The child and his guardians are simply unaware of what is good for the child and what the child really feels. The pedophile determinedly sees it as his or her task to bring life and happiness into the child's dreary and unhappy existence. Thus, regardless of overwhelming evidence to the contrary, the pedophile is convinced that his feelings are reciprocated. In other words, that the child is equally infatuated with him. The pedophile interprets everything the child does, or refrains from doing, as coded messages, confessing to and conveying the child's interest in the pedophile and eternal devotion to the pedophile and to the relationship. Some, although by no means all, pedophiles are socially inept, awkward, schizoid, suffer from a host of mood and anxiety disorders. They may also be legitimately involved with the child. It could be a stepmother, stepfather, former spouse, teacher, gym instructor, sibling. They could be involved with the child's parents, for instance, a former boyfriend, a one-night stand, colleagues, co-workers. Pedophiles are driven by their all-consuming loneliness and their all-pervasive fantasies, compensatory fantasies. Consequently, pedophiles react badly to any perceived rejection by their victims. They turn on a dime. They become dangerously vindictive, out to destroy the source of their mounting frustration. When their relationship looks doomed and hopeless, some pedophiles violently embark on a spree of self-destruction and other destruction. Pedophilia is to some extent a culture-bound syndrome, defined as it is by the chronological age of a child involved. Hebephile is the exclusive sexual infatuation with teenagers, and is not considered to be a form of pedophilia or even paraphilia. The very idea of impermissible and later illegal sex with children has emerged in the West hand in hand with the novel concept of childhood. As Western dominance and values spread globally, so did Western mores and ethics. In some cultures, societies, and countries, Afghanistan for instance, the age of consent is as low as 12. The marriageable age in Britain until the end of the 19th century was 10. Sex and genital foreplay with children was common, encouraged, and even medically prescribed, literally all over the world, until 150 years ago. Incest and pedophilia were often linked and sanctioned. Various religious texts, including the Jewish Talmud, surprisingly, and other progressive texts, permit sexual relations, including incest, as early as age 3 for a girl or 8 for a boy. Pedophilia was and is common and socially condoned practice in certain tribal societies and isolated communities, such as the island of Pitcairn. It would therefore be wise to redefine pedophilia as an attraction to or sexual acts with prepubescent children or with people of the equivalent mental age, the retarded, in contravention of social, legal, and cultural accepted practices. Pedophilia is culture-bound, depends on the cultural context. The committee that is writing the next edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual is considering to render hebephilia, when adults are sexually attracted to teenagers around the time of puberty, as a subtype of pedophilia, and to rename it Pedo-Hebephilia. And here's a quote from the New Scientist. The rows over hebephilia and paraphilic coercive disorder aren't academic, because 20 US states have passed laws that allow sex offenders who have served their sentences to be detained indefinitely in a secure hospital if they are deemed sexual predators. This can only be done if the offenders have a psychiatric disorder that increases their risk of reoffending, which few do, according to the DSM. A critic says that if hebephilia and paraphilic coercive disorder make it into the DSM-5, they will be seized upon to consign men to a lifetime of incarceration. Perhaps there's no other solution. We all collect souvenirs. Souvenirs from our trips, souvenirs from our working places, souvenirs from our relationships. I don't want to sound creepy, but we all have aide-mémoire, memory aids. We all have objects, photographs, recordings that assist us in dredging up long-term memory and converting it into a vivid form of short-term memory. Of course, if this process becomes involuntary, what we have is emotional dysregulation. We are overwhelmed by emotions and the memories attached to them, or in very extreme cases, flashbacks, when we cannot tell the difference between memory and reality. So, what is so different about psychopaths, sexual sadists, serial killers, narcissists? When these people collect trophies, when they assemble mementos, why do we say that their actions, their choices, the objects that they accumulate are pathological? What is sick in what they're doing? What's the difference between having a lock of hair of a beloved one and a lock of hair of the victim of rape and murder? This is the topic, the morbid topic of today's video. My name is Sam Vaknin. I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited, and I'm a professor of psychology. Psychopaths, serial killers, sexual sadists, and narcissists, they all collect mementos and trophies. It is the motivation behind these collections, and of course the nature of the collections, that render these activities manifestly pathological, sick, morbid, and dark. These people all have a disrupted sense of self, a disrupted self-concept. They don't really feel alive. It's as if they're dead inside, and they spend their entire lives trying to convince themselves that they do exist. It is as if in the absence of drama, or in the absence of hurting others, or in the absence of disruption and mayhem and chaos, these people don't feel alive. They need to introduce into the human environment a lot of fear, a lot of pain, as I said, a lot of drama. But all this is done in order to prove to themselves that they do exist, that this all-pervasive, all-permeating, all-consuming, all-subsuming feeling that they are somehow not real, somehow imitatory, somehow some kind of simulation. They're trying to overcome this. They also have lingering suspicions that they may be not entirely normal. So they're trying to prove to themselves that they are normal. These twin motivations, the drive to collect evidence of one's own existence, and the drive to prove to oneself and to others that one's life, one's personality are totally normal. This drive to normalcy and drive to existence, or the experience of existence, these are the twin drives behind narcissism, psychopathy, sadism, and in extreme forms, behind people who become serial killers. Now, the trophies and mementos that healthy, normal people accumulate, collect over a lifetime, they are linked to memories and to emotions. So when you have a memento or a trophy from a trip abroad, it brings up the memories of the trip and the emotions that you have experienced while you were traveling. That's in a healthy setting. With these sick individuals, the mementos and trophies do not represent memories. They're not linked to memories, or at the very least, not directly linked to memories, and not mainly linked to memories. Memory is an afterthought, a side effect. The mementos and the trophies are linked to other people. Psychopaths, serial killers, sexual sadists, narcissists, pedophiles, and so on, they collect people. They don't collect memories. They have problems with memory. They have memory gaps and dissociation. They don't collect emotions. They don't do emotions. They have no access to positive emotions, only to negative ones. So these are not the main drivers and motivators in the accumulation of trophies and mementos in these cases. The main thing is the individuals from whom the trophies and mementos were taken. Not the act of taking, but the victims. The mementos and the trophies are what is known as synecdoches. A synecdoche is when a part represents the whole. We have this situation in fetishism, where a body part or a fashion accessory represents an entire human being. The sexual attraction of the fetishist is towards this synecdoche, towards this part that represents the whole. Similarly, trophies and mementos in mentally ill people represent the victims. It's a part of the victim, an item of clothing, a body part, hair, fashion accessory, something to do with the victim. But this object that is linked to the victim does not represent a memory of the events or of the victim or of the interaction with the victim. It represents the victim itself. It encapsulates and reifies and embodies the victim. It's as if when a psychopath or a serial killer or a sexual sadist or a narcissist or a pedophile holds the trophy in his hand, when he or she place the memento on the shelf, they are actually capturing, encapsulating the victim himself or herself. It's like trapping an ant in amber. The victim is trapped in the object, in the memento, in the trophy, in totality, in the victim's total being is embedded in the trophy or in the memento as far as the sick individual is concerned. And that's, of course, very reminiscent of psychic mediums. When you go to a psychic medium, she would tell you, or he would tell you, give me an item of clothing. Give me some object that used to belong to the person. Then they touch this object. And then they're able to communicate with the person because the person is the object. So if you come to a psychic medium and you say, you know, I would like to communicate with a deceased loved one, she would tell you, give me her purse or give me her handkerchief. And she would touch the handkerchief or the purse or the shoes or whatever. And through the object, she would make contact with the person who used to own the object. It's the same, exactly the same state of mind of the perpetrators that I've mentioned, including psychopaths and narcissists. The object is the person because people are objects. It's kind of a shorthand and a shortcut rather than place the individual on the shelf, which might prove a bit difficult logistically, let alone biologically, you place something that used to belong to the individual. Could be a body part in extreme cases. Recently, a medical doctor has been caught in France, a pediatrician, and he has molested and mutilated and raped 299 children over a career spanning 25 years. And this medical doctor took notes of everything he has done meticulously. Another affair, also in France, I don't know what's happening over there. Gisèle Pellicot, her husband, drugged her and granted access to other men to her body, actually allowing them to rape her while she was drugged. And he kept well over 1,000 videotapes of the proceedings. These videotapes, these meticulously maintained lists, are mementos. They are trophies. They are the victims. It's not only a question of memory or reliving the experience or basking in the glory of the accomplishments or hoarding kind of events. It's not only that. It's a way to capture the victim so that she doesn't go away. It's a way, accumulating these trophies and mementos is a way to cope with overwhelming separation anxiety, separation insecurity, abandonment anxiety. It's as if you're a sexual sadist, if you're a psychopath, if you're a narcissist, if you're a pedophile, if you're a serial killer, and you maltreated, abused, even killed a victim, and you take a trophy that used to belong to the victim, including possibly a body part, it's as if that way you fixate the victim. You render the victim immobile and inert, unable to abandon you ever. It's a form of introjection via projection. There's an external object that is then internalized and introjected as a representation of the totality of the victim, a synecdoche, as I mentioned. Now, many of you would say, but not all psychopaths are serial killers, not all narcissists are sexual sadists. I mean, why did you create this mixed list? Many people, most people who are diagnosed as psychopaths don't kill people. They don't rape people. They don't, they're just psychopaths. And most narcissists, actually the vast majority of narcissists are not serial killers and they're not sexual sadists, and they're just narcissists. They're just, they do what narcissists do. They're being obnoxious and disempathic, exploitative and envious and so on. So why this mixed list? Because in all these cases, psychopaths, serial killers, pedophiles, sexual sadists, narcissists, and so on, there is a process of converting the victims from external objects into internal objects, often via the mediation and the agency of something that used to belong to the victim, via fetishism, via a fetish. So a narcissist would convert an external object, a potential intimate partner, a potential source of narcissistic supply, or a potential participant in the shared fantasy. A narcissist would convert the external object into an internal object, would introject the external object, would create an avatar or a representation or a snapshot of the external object in his mind. And this internal object would acquire a life of its own, while the external object is rendered mute and moot and mummified. So this is the process of snapshotting, where the narcissist converts people out there external, separate objects into internal objects immersed, subsumed by his mind, figments of his imagination and cognitive processes. And all this is true. But narcissists often do this by using fetishes, by using objects that belong to the external objects. So, by using objects that belong to the intimate partner, by using body parts, not necessarily detached from the victim, but they use fetishes as a bridge. The process of snapshotting is a process of fetishization, converting the external object into a fetish. Similarly, psychopaths, when they home in or zero in a victim, they're goal-oriented. They want sex, they want money, they want power, they want control, so they home in or zero in on a victim. When they do this, they would tend to interact with the victim via some kind of fetish. For example, money, or status symbols, or trophy wife. So they would convert people around them into amalgams or assemblages of fetishes, fetish-like objects. This is of course the case with serial killers and sexual sadists who literally dismember victims and take parts, body parts, as the representation of these victims in their lives. So they would decapitate people, or otherwise dismember or eviscerate them, like Jack the Ripper or Jeffrey Dahmer, and so on. And they would use these as stand-ins, placeholders for the victims, but also as full-fledged representations of the victims. In many cases, the victims are dead. And the only thing that remains alive in the sexual killer's mind or the sexual sadist's mind is the body part. Or the trophy. Doesn't have to be a body part, could be a clothing, but it has to be something intimate. A piece of clothing, a fashion accessory, a shoe, a necklace, something intimate, something that's been in touch with the victim's body and can serve as a synecdoche. Of course, trophies and mementos serve to bridge the dissociative processes that underlie many of these mental illnesses. These mental illnesses involve a lot of dissociative memory gaps, blacking outs, and so on and so forth. And the mementos and the trophies are the equivalents of confabulation in pathological narcissism. It's like if you have a memento or you have a trophy from the event, it's proof that the event has took place. It's like you don't remember it maybe, or you don't remember it clearly, or the whole thing is fuzzy and so on, but the memento or the trophy, the object or the body part, they restore your reality testing. They restore your memory. They ground you. It's a grounding mechanism. By touching the body part, or by touching the piece of clothing, or by touching the fashion accessory, and they often touch these things. They often play with them. They often unearth them and use them. And so there's a lot of tactile and olfactory and sensual interaction between these seriously mentally ill people and the trophies and mementos that they collect. And this interaction, which is direct, non-mediated, restores the sense of continuity of memory and therefore identity. Memento and trophy, proof that the event has taken place, substitute for memory, form of confabulation. The memory gap is bridged, however artificially and superciliously and superficially it's bridged, and then there's a sense of personhood or ersatz selfhood. Of course, when you make a list of all the children you have raped, when you videotape all the men who have raped your wife with your consent and collaboration and collusion, you're setting up yourself for failure. It's as if you're collecting the evidence against you, as if you are your own law enforcement, as if you are the police. You're doing the police work. You're doing the work of the police and the work of the prosecution, because you provide them with meticulously arranged and alleged proof, evidence of your misdeeds and crimes. Why do they do that? Because these people, of course, possess what metaphorically can be described as an internalized bad object. They are very self-punitive, self-hating, self-defeating, and self-destructive, as Hervey Cleckley observed about almost 80 years ago, or more than 80 years ago. There's a lot of masochism involved. Sadism and masochism are flip sides of an identical coin, of a single coin. If you're a sadist, you're also masochist, in the vast majority of cases. And so there's a lot of, I need to be punished. I'm a bad person. I'm evil. I'm wicked. I need to destroy myself before it's too late. I want to be captured. Or I become so self-confident that I undermine myself. My self-confidence becomes weaponized against me. The sexual predator or sexual sadist, their apparent self-confidence is actually a form of self-destructiveness. It's weaponized against them. And so there's a lot of self-punitive activity going on. And they maintain these records, knowing full well that one day all these proofs and evidence, pieces of evidence, will come to light and doom them completely. And yet they compulsively continue to do this. It's the only way to take themselves down, to castigate and chastise themselves, to in a way do to themselves what they have done to the victims. Trophies and mementos are triggers. They trigger an addictive repetition compulsion. Now that's very difficult to understand, but let me try a simile or an analogy. A bottle of alcohol, a bottle of an alcoholic drink would trigger an alcoholic to drink. When an alcoholic comes across an alcoholic drink, he finds the alcoholic drink irresistible. This is known as cravings. Irresistible. And then he drinks. The alcohol in the bottle triggers the alcoholic person to drink. Similarly, the mementos and the trophies trigger the sick individual to repeat the behavior. They create a repetition compulsion because the objects themselves and the collection, the process of collecting these objects, is addictive. And it's addictive because the size and quality of the collection serve to self-enhance and regulate the sense of self-worth. It's a form of external regulation. It's as if take a serial killer, for example. The more trophies he has, amassed over the years. And I'm saying he, because the vast majority of serial killers are men. So the more trophies he has amassed over the years, the more confident, assertive, proud of himself he is. It's as if the trophies and mementos enhance his self-image and self-perception and self-confidence and self-esteem and regulate his sense of self-worth, stabilize it. We call this external regulation. Someone with a borderline personality disorder would use the intimate partner to regulate herself or himself, to regulate emotions, to stabilize labile moods and so on. It's not very different to a serial killer. The borderline personality regards intimate partners as kind of regulatory objects. They regard the intimate partner through the lens of what the intimate partner can do for them as far as regulation of internal processes go. The borderline outsources her mind to the intimate partner and uses the intimate, objectifies the intimate partner, uses the intimate partner as a kind of regulator. In future, probably artificial intelligence could play this role. It's not very different to a serial killer, because in the serial killer's mind, the same process is happening. The serial killer objectifies the victim and then uses the victim as a form of regulator, uses the victim to buttress, for example, the sense of self-esteem. The serial killer is proud of how many people he has killed. He dwells upon each and every detail of each and every murder. The sexual sadist would replay the acts in his mind time and again. The psychopath would brag about how many people he has exploited and abused and tortured and molested and worse. And the narcissist would regard the presence of a participant in the shared fantasy, could be an intimate partner or a best friend, he would regard their presence as a kind of acquisition. It's as if he has purchased slaves. It's a form of slavery, mental slavery, as if his intimate partner and his best friends and so on, they're slaves, and he owns them in a property ledger. He's converted them into objects that help the narcissist to regulate his sense of self-worth and other internal processes. And so you see, all these characters, they convert people into objects, and then they take away trophies and mementos, including body parts, in order to be in possession of these people that they have objectified and dehumanized. Trophies and mementos also serve as learning materials. They remind these miscreants, these perpetrators, they remind them what they may have done wrong. And they hark back, they go back to these mementos and trophies in order to kind of rehash the experience, dissect it, analyze it, and learn from it how to better repeat the same misconduct or misdeeds in the future, with fewer chances of getting caught, or with more excitement, or with a higher level of thrill, or with better collaboration by the victim. So these are learning materials. They're triggers, they trigger the behavior, but they also teach the perpetrators how to improve their performance, if you wish, how to polish it and shine it. You see that trophies and mementos play a vital role in the psychic economy of narcissists, psychopaths, and the extreme cases of narcissism and psychopathy, serial killers, sexual sadists, pedophiles, people who commit incest, and so on. These are human trophies, and they correspond either to internal processes or to internal objects. And the whole action is internalized, not external, not externalized. So when a victim is mutilated or raped or murdered or worse, or dismembered, at that point, these processes take place internally. It's an enactment in the real world of internal dynamics. And then when it's all over, there's a need to maintain a tenuous connection some kind of bridge to reality. Because these people are aware that their hold on reality is very compromised. They're terrified of themselves, they're terrified of their inability to function in the world and with other people. And so they need to confiscate, to appropriate from the victims some items, some elements, some body parts, so as to maintain this tenuous relationship with reality. It's the body part, the purse, the handkerchief, the scarf, they are the victim. And the victim is real. The victim is reality, stands for reality, is a part of reality. And by owning the victim, however symbolically, these people remain in their own diseased minds, grounded in reality, able to function in it, and perhaps get away with it. Apropos the zodiac.